I've often heard new writers say the words, I can't think of anything to write about. For some reason, they believe that there isn't anything left to write. Trust me, nothing could be further from the truth. If you happen to be one of those writers, new or seasoned, who claim to be unable to find anything worthwhile to write about, then I say you're simply not looking in the right places. There are so many things you can write about that you could actually write about something different every day for the rest of your life and not make a dent in the available topics that are out there. You're probably thinking, every plot idea that I come up with, it's already been done before. And you would be correct. Every idea that you will probably ever come up with has most likely been done sometime before by someone else, not just once, but thousands of times. Right now, you're probably thinking that I'm contradicting myself. Well, I'll explain myself a little later, but first, it's time for another of my little tales. There was once a man named Leonidas who was madly in love with the beautiful Irene. The problem was Irene was captivated by the charming Kiros, but Leonidas knew something about Irene that might help him to win her affections. Irene was as desiring as she was beautiful, and she would only remain with a man if he was able to provide all of the comforts that she desired. And that meant that only a man of means could ever hope to keep her. Leonidas, although his love for Irene was great, he wasn't a man of means. At least he wouldn't be until his 25th birthday, when he would have complete access to his inheritance. Now, it's important to point out that Leonidas was the nephew of Kiros and had always, because he looked up to him like a father, desired whatever he had. When Leonidas was a mere child, he wanted to dress like Kiros. When Leonidas was a teenager, he wanted to travel as Kiros did, and now as a young man, he wants the woman Kiros has and would do whatever it took to get her. He had a plan, knowing that although his uncle had wealth, it was limited. So he came up with a way of shaming him into spending his wealth or run the risk of having Irene no longer finding him a worthwhile suitor. His plan was, after his uncle had spent all of his money, leaving him impoverished, Irene would lose interest in him, making it easy for Leonidas to win her over. One evening, Leonidas approached his uncle Kiros and told him that there were several suitors planning on proving themselves worthy of marrying Irene. And if he was going to outdo them, he would need to give her something they could not. What could I give her that so many others could not? Asked Kiros. Leonidas smiled and replied, if I had the ability, I would spend as much of my inheritance as necessary to build her the grandest house ever conceived. Then that would bring me great happiness. Kiros thought long and hard. Very well, said Kiros. I will build her the greatest house she could ever hope for. After about 3 months into the construction of the house, Leonidas figured that his uncle's wealth was nearing its end, and so to hurry things along, he decided to shame his uncle a little further. Uncle Kiros, I have heard talk of another house being built to capture the attention of Irene. You will need to add to your house something that they have not. What could I add that I already haven't? He asked. Since Irene likes to swim, even in the winter months, you should build her an indoor pool. That is an expense I don't think is reasonable, said Kiros. Leonidas smiled and replied, if I had the ability, I would spend as much of my inheritance as necessary to build her the most amazing indoor pool ever seen. Then that would bring me great happiness. Very well, said Kiros. I will build her the greatest indoor pool ever seen. 3 months passed again, and with the indoor pool complete and the construction of the house showing no signs of slowing, Leonidas couldn't understand how his uncle's wealth hadn't already been depleted. So he decided to make certain that his wealth would be gone before the house was complete. Uncle Kiris, I overheard Irene speaking to her friends the other day, and she said that anyone who builds her a solarium will be the one she will remain with to her dying day. That is an expense I don't think is worth incurring, said Kiras. The cost of the many panes of glass alone could empty even the most amply filled bank account. Leonidas smiled and replied, if I had the ability, I would empty my bank account to build her the most amazing solarium any woman has ever sat in. Very well, said Kiras. I will build her the most amazing solarium any woman has ever sat in. Leonidas knew that with the added cost of the solarium, his uncle would not only be bankrupt before the house was finished, the knowledge of losing Irene would be so devastating he would likely end his own life. But at the end of another 3 months, the house was finished. The most spectacular house anyone had ever seen. Kiras approached Leonidas with a smile and thanked him for all of his help in making him the happiest man in the world. And tomorrow, Irene and I are going shopping for the engagement ring she has always wanted, added Kiras. Today, I'll talk about how even though the odds seem stacked against you, there are still many good stories left for you to tell. And then I'll finish the story and tell you how such a lavish house didn't bankrupt Kiras. To be honest with you, there are only about 7 basic plot categories that a writer can actually write under. Yeah, believe it or not, only 7. But you see, from just these 7 categories, it is possible to create an endless amount of stories. And these categories even have titles. You may have even heard about a few of them: Overcoming the Monster, Rags to Riches, The Quest, Voyage and Return, Comedy, Tragedy, and Rebirth. Now, all stories that have ever been or ever will be thought up are derived from these 7 storylines. From any of these 7 basic plot types, with a good imagination, you can create an endless amount of good and entertaining stories. Let's take tragedy as our first example. It's when your protagonist experiences a significant downfall, often due to a flaw in their character or a series of unfortunate events. Can you think of a story where this might apply? Well, one of the most well known is Romeo and Juliet. Young love not permitted, and as a result, the protagonist, in this case being both Romeo and Juliet, suffered a significant downfall, which resulted in both of their deaths. Now, if all writers believed that since this type of story was already done and done so well, there was no need to try to do it again, then a later story of tragedy named, wait for it, The Titanic, would never have been written. But although these 2 stories were both of the same plot type, following the same criteria, the protagonist experiencing a significant downfall, often due to a flaw in their character, in the hands of 2 different and imaginative writers, we have the creation of 2 completely different stories. Oh, yeah, and they were written 400 years apart. Ever seen the movie $1 Million Baby? That's a tragedy. How about Schindler's List? Another tragedy. They all follow the criteria of the tragic plot, but are unique in their own way. And that's down to the imagination of the writer. And let's face it, if you are a writer without imagination, then the only thing of interest that you will probably ever write will be your own biography. But getting back to the tragic plot type, I've just mentioned four stories. There are thousands and thousands of others that fall within this category. And there are so many because if you, as a writer, have an imagination that stretches beyond your own self, it's easy to create new stories. I'll even prove just how easy it is. It's time for one of my example stories. A young boy named Larkin, a kind hearted soul who is a dreamer, always seeing the good in others. He isn't a popular kid in school. In fact, he is bullied and made fun of. But his positive outlook and love for his fellow schoolmates allows him to always find a way to turn the other cheek. In later years, he marries a childhood sweetheart who, in spite of his failure to stand up for himself, has fallen deeply in love with his kind and giving manner. His father and mother had been happily married for almost 40 years, and he wanted to have the kind of long sustaining marriage that his father had. Tragedy befalls him years later when his father passes away. This leaves Larkin as the head of the family and in charge of taking over the family factory. It is a thriving business that his father has run with an iron hand successfully for over 30 years. Now, with Larkin at the helm, he vows to do things differently. He understands that his father had made this company the success it is and wants to prove that he can achieve the success his father had achieved. Larkin decides to bring the factory into a new era, more successful, but only if he were able to put the happiness and well being of the workers first. He listens to their complaints of long hours, little time off, and poor working conditions. In his first year, he shortened the workday by a full 2 hours. He believed that making the workers work long hours was damaging to their health. The workers were so happy they regarded Larkin as not just a boss, but also a friend. In his second year, although profits were down, he introduced paid vacation time, allowing the workers to take necessary leaves of absence. He believed that if they were well rested and happy, they would work more productively and sales would increase. In his third year, with profits at an all time low, he was convinced by the workers that it was mainly due to the poor working conditions. So, he spent a great deal of time and money renovating the factory, believing that with such a beautiful workspace that was not only a healthy environment but a joy to work within, the workers would work harder and subsequently the business would see the type of profits it once saw while his father was running the factory with an iron fist. By the fourth year, his wife could no longer accept his forgive and forget lifestyle, and although she still loved his unique outlook on life, could no longer stay around and watch his life and business spiral into ruin. That same year, without enough profit to sustain the factory, regrettably, he had to close the factory and send all the workers home. After struggling with the guilt from the realization that he wasn't able to fill his father's shoes by sustaining a decades long marriage, as well as following in his father's footsteps and keeping the family business a success, he slowly dissolved into a fragment of his former self, which eventually caused him to take his own life. He was found one morning hanging from the rafters of his abandoned factory. Now, I just thought that up on the fly. It's a bit rough, but it covers the criteria of the classic tragedy storyline. It's probably as far away from Romeo and Juliet as you can get while still following the same tragic storyline, which proves the point that there are just so many variations of the basic storylines out there that it would be impossible for all of the writers writing today to exhaust them all. Now, I've been concentrating on tragedy, but it's the same for the other 6 basic plot types. You could even take ideas from 2 different plot types and combine them into one new idea. How about rags to riches with a tragic twist? A man grows up poor, always wanting to experience life like the rich. Finally, he gets his wish and after winning the lottery, achieves more money than anyone he's ever known. Now, the rich lifestyle he had once coveted was now his, and the rich he once looked up to were now not so rich in comparison to the wealth he now enjoyed. But he discovered that with such wealth comes a great price. As a poor man, he had friends who loved him for him. Now, as a rich man, he no longer had any real friends, and those that associated with him only did so to acquire some of his wealth. There he sat, atop all others, rich, powerful, and alone. He soon realized that being poor and truly loved gave him a much more satisfying wealth than being rich and powerful. In the end, he spiraled into a state of lonely depression and died longing to once again experience the wealth of love that he only ever realized as a poor man. I tell you, these stories practically write themselves, which further proves my point that there are just so many things to write about. So, if you are a writer with imagination and you are still having trouble finding something to write about, maybe you need to stop trying so hard. Maybe the story ideas that you are getting are just not right for you. In other words, you're just not liking what you're finding. So then try changing it up a bit. Take a walk down a street you've never walked down before, or drive someplace new. I guess what I'm trying to say is get out of your usual routine and give your imagination something new to grab hold of. I think you'll be pleasantly surprised at what you might find just being somewhere else. And now I'll finish the story I call Where There's a Will, There's a Way. You see, Leonidas' father had made Kyros the executor of his will, and in that will was a clause which stated that Leonidas didn't need to wait until he turned 25 before receiving his inheritance. He could receive it earlier if the executor, who was Kyros, felt that Leonidas' request for it sooner was for something that would bring him great happiness. And since Leonidas had proven to his uncle Kyros that building that house for Irene would bring him great happiness, Kyros used all his nephew's inheritance to make that wish come true. Thanks for watching, and if you found anything that I said beneficial to you in any way, hit that subscribe button because you never know. My next video might just be helpful too.